When sanctions were imposed, many believed that Russia's economy would quickly collapse. But in reality, after a few years, the outcome turned out completely different. Russia is still growing, unemployment is at a record low, and energy exports have found new directions. So what has prevented the West, despite heavy pressure from shaking this country? How has Russia managed to adapt, and can this model remain sustainable in the future? When Western sanctions targeted Russia's energy sector, many believed that revenues from oil and gas, long seen as the backbone of Moscow's economy, would rapidly decline. Yet the reality was not entirely as predicted. Subsequent developments showed that Russia had discovered ways to adapt, making the economic picture far more complex and unpredictable. Instead of depending on the European market, Moscow redirected exports toward Asian partners. Figures from multiple international analytical agencies reveal that Russian oil and gas have been flowing strongly into China and India, both securing foreign currency revenues and establishing new trade channels. This move is viewed as a way to lessen the blow of losing traditional European customers. One notable point often highlighted in reports is the operation of the so-called shadow fleet oil tankers functioning outside normal monitoring systems. Because the companies are registered across scattered jurisdictions, they are difficult to track and often conduct complex ship-to-ship transfers offshore. Although the transparency of this mechanism remains controversial, it has enabled Russia to maintain large-scale oil and gas exports, with China and India rising to become major customers, partly replacing Europe's previous import role. One of Russia's most significant changes since the conflict erupted in 2022 is the sharp increase in defense spending. According to numerous reports, this spending has reached its highest level in decades, equivalent to more than 6% of gross domestic product. This figure indicates that Russia has entered what many analysts call a wartime economy. In that context, a wide range of industries tied to military demand, from metallurgy, steel production, and armored vehicle manufacturing to electronics, logistics, and transportation, have all seen rapid expansion. Enterprises have received large state orders allowing them to recruit tens of thousands of workers. As a result, Russia's unemployment rate fell to a record low of about 2.5% by the end of 2024, according to official figures. In the short term, defense spending has acted as a stimulus boost for domestic production, creating jobs and keeping the economic machinery running. Some observers liken this situation to an emergency stimulus package because it directly channels resources into factories and heavy industries. However, in the long run, experts warn that excessive reliance on military spending could bring unpredictable consequences. Funds allocated to civilian sectors, such as healthcare, education, and technology research, risk being squeezed. Moreover, focusing too heavily on military production may slow down innovation in civilian technology industries, making it difficult for the economy to remain competitive as the global environment changes. After many goods and technologies from the West became restricted, Russia was forced to pursue greater self-sufficiency in production. According to economic sources, this was both a challenge and an opportunity for domestic industries to expand. Sectors that had long relied heavily on imports such as electronic components, machinery, information technology, and even daily consumer products began to be replaced with local solutions. Some observers argue that this very forced substitution created momentum for many domestic companies to grow. Numerous factories expanded capacity, small and medium enterprises seized the chance to enter the market, and agriculture was boosted to secure a stable food supply. As domestic production capacity expanded, labor demand also increased. Official figures show that unemployment dropped to its lowest levels in decades. At the same time, domestic consumption became a key driver, accounting for about 70% of gross domestic product, sustaining millions of jobs and supporting social stability. Another pillar supporting economic stability is low public debt. According to financial analyses, Russia's public debt stood at roughly 17% of gross domestic product in 2024, significantly lower than the average for many major economies, including the United States and several European nations. This low debt gives the government wider fiscal room it can spend on infrastructure, support businesses, or launch relief packages when needed without heavy repayment pressures. It also helps reinforce confidence in macroeconomic stability, both among citizens and domestic investors. Russian citizens, thanks to economic support measures and steady income levels, have continued to spend on goods ranging from food and clothing to cars and electronic devices. This creates a positive cycle. Domestic production meets local demand, and consumption in turn stimulates further production. One of the most significant shifts in Russia's economic policy after 2022 has been its effort to de-dollarize international trade. Analysts note that this move stemmed from Russia's restricted access to US dollars and Western-controlled payment channels. Instead of conducting most transactions in US dollars as before, Russia shifted to other currencies such as the Chinese yuan, the Indian rupee, the Turkish lira, and even gold. Notably, trade with China surged. By 2024, bilateral trade hit a record of about 240 billion US dollars, with a large share settled in yuan and rubles rather than US dollars. India also emerged as a crucial partner in this strategy. According to economic reports, Russia and India established a rupee-based payment system for billions of US dollars worth of oil and gas. These direct payment channels allowed trade to bypass Western banks. At the same time, Russia ramped up gold reserves as a safeguard. Numerous reports indicate that Russia's gold stockpile surpassed 2,400 tons by the end of 2024, making gold a central part of the national financial defense policy. Analysts suggest that de-dollarization not only helps Russia limit the impact of sanctions, but also chips away at the US dollar's dominance in certain international transactions. This trend may encourage other nations in similar situations to explore alternatives. However, experts caution that de-dollarization cannot happen overnight on a global scale. The US dollar still dominates in trade and reserves worldwide. Therefore, Russia's move is seen as a way to mitigate risks in the short term while experimenting with a more diversified financial structure in the long run. Amid restricted access to Western markets and financial institutions, Russia has leaned more heavily on BRICS, the alliance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Formed in 2009, BRICS has been viewed as a rising economic and political counterweight, aiming to reduce reliance on Western-led mechanisms. After 2022, BRICS became a crucial cooperation channel for Moscow. Figures show that trade between Russia and member states surged, surpassing 300 billion US dollars in 2024, nearly compensating for much of the lost Western market. Beyond China and India, other partners like Brazil and South Africa also increased imports of fertilizers, metals, and agricultural products from Russia. A key highlight is the new development bank, the financial institution of BRICS. Through this channel, Russia reportedly accessed billions of US dollars in funding for domestic infrastructure and industrial projects. This mechanism allows Moscow to raise capital outside the traditional international banking system, which is heavily influenced by sanctions. At the same time, BRICS has discussed the possibility of creating a common currency or at least an independent payment system to reduce US dollar dominance in international trade. Although this plan remains at the discussion stage without a clear roadmap, many experts note that raising the idea itself reflects a trend towards seeking new balance in the global financial structure. Although Russia's economy has shown remarkable resilience under external pressure, many experts believe there are major, medium, and long-term risks. The first is inflation. Official figures show that in 2024, Russia recorded inflation of about 9.2%. This number is significantly higher than before the conflict, and if the trend continues, household purchasing power will decline, directly impacting consumption. One of the economy's main pillars. The second is reliance on military spending. Large defense outlays have boosted production and jobs in the short term, but in the long run, many analysts worry that this imbalance may cut into healthcare, education, and civilian research. That would not only reduce economic efficiency, but could also restrain technological innovation. The third is a lack of advanced technology. After losing access to Western imports, many Russian industries have had to rely on domestic substitutes. Though progress has been made, sectors such as aviation electronics and automotive manufacturing still struggle due to shortages of modern components and technologies. If this gap persists, Russia could fall behind in key global industries. Finally, the sustainability of the development model. Many observers argue that recent growth has been driven largely by energy exports and defense-related production. These are two pillars that bring short-term gains but are insufficient to ensure long-term stability. Russia's challenge is to gradually transition to a more diversified economy, less dependent on energy and the military. From these factors, it is clear that Russia's current economic picture carries both strengths and risks. According to several analyses, to maintain sustainable stability, Moscow will need to rebalance spending control inflation while promoting technological innovation and expanding civilian industries. This is not just a domestic issue, but also tied to Russia's position in the global economy for decades to come. Russia has demonstrated extraordinary adaptability, turning sanctions into a driver for strengthening internal resilience and deepening ties with non-Western nations. However, the larger question remains whether this model is sustainable in the long run and whether economic sanctions are still an effective tool for the West to shape global politics. If you want to continue following in-depth analyses of international developments, be sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss upcoming videos.